Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be with you today, virtually at the Taking Nature Black Conference. Scientist and environmental activist Sandra Steingarber once said, "We are all musicians in a great human orchestra, and it's time to play the Save the World Symphony." When it comes to advancing action to combat our climate crisis, nothing could be closer to the truth. Protecting our environment requires an engaged and increasingly diverse coalition committed staunchly to the urgent need to act on climate change. Engaging with members of Congress and their staff is a critical component to advocating for climate action. Members of Congress have tens of thousands of constituents and many political issues competing for their attention. Constituents like you are critical to convincing them that climate change should be high on their priorities. There are different ways of raising the issue. A common approach is to use a mass email campaign or petition on a national issue. These have to get a significant size to have much of an impact. But one of the most effective things to do is to actually meet with your member of Congress, ideally with a group of constituents. As the saying goes, showing up is 80% of life. If you want to change the way Washington works or sees your priorities addressed in public policy, the first step is simply showing up. The best advocates are the ones that show up for the issues they care deeply about. And the best part is, in today's Zoom age, you can visit your member of Congress anywhere you have reliable internet connection. We know that the climate crisis affects people from all walks of life. Try to be sure your group reflects that diversity. Coordinate a group with a range of ages, people whose livelihoods are affected by climate policy, faith leaders, etc., to break through the stereotype that climate justice is a special interest and not the wide-ranging crisis of our lifetime. Research your member of Congress before you visit to have a head start on their perspective and ability to affect change. Almost all members are on Twitter, and most of their official websites are with their lastname.house.gov. There you can find out whether they serve on key committees to advancing climate justice, like Energy and Commerce or Natural Resources, two committees I serve on, and where they stand on major environmental issues. Finding out about their interests may help spark some specialized ideas to assist in making the case for climate action. Climate change is a life and death issue and an urgent one. From years of working tirelessly to build consensus on this issue, I know it can be incredibly frustrating. Frustrating when people don't get it. But to persuade you, you need to be persuasive. Your passion when talking climate change is important, but one must not be so passionate that the message is lost. Allies like you and I already know that urgent action is needed, that the policies in place are not sufficient to securing a clean energy future, and that the federal government needs renewed commitment to addressing the crisis of our time. But because there are so many different areas in which action is needed to achieve what we need to achieve overall, we may wish to be more strategic in choosing what areas to highlight. Specifically, for other members, it may be helpful to frame climate action as action on jobs, health, and justice for the American people. And thanks to the works of grassroots advocates like you across the country in making climate change a cornerstone of the 2020 election season, we have made progress towards our goals. After years of destructive anti-environmental policies under the Trump administration, President Biden continues to make good on his promises to address the pressing need to act on the climate crisis with a much-needed all-of-government approach to provide new opportunities to those that have been disproportionately burdened both by environmental injustice and economic inequality. The President has been clear that climate change is the challenge that will define our future. With recent executive actions on climate justice and federal investment in transitional energy communities, the Biden-Harris administration has moved our country one step closer to the inclusive, clean energy economy our climate emergency demands, creating millions of good-paying jobs and protecting our planet for future generations to come. But we have more work to do, my friends. We can build a just and clean economy that creates high-paying, living wage union jobs while tackling the climate crisis and addressing our legacy of environmental injustice, and each one of us has a part to play. I know firsthand that building support for a comprehensive approach to climate policy and a just transition away from fossil fuels is possible. The House Select Committee on the Climate Crisis report, released last year, which is the first ever congressional plan that lays the groundwork for achieving net zero carbon pollution by 2050, featured many of the same bold ideas championed in President Biden's climate plan, including my Environmental Justice for All Act legislation, crafted by the people, for the people, that I first introduced in the 116th Congress alongside of Chair Raul Grijalva of the Natural Resources Committee. It is no secret that the same racist economic and political forces that previously redlined Black and brown neighborhoods still exist today. These same forces are behind policies that ensure underserved communities are more likely to live on the front lines of our climate crisis or the fence lines of polluting industries. But with legislation like the Environmental Justice for All Act, we can give these communities a voice and a means to fight back against the pollution that threatens their children and their families. That is why we spent much of the last 2 years listening and learning about the impacts of federal environmental policy and climate change on communities across the country, and building a community-led, community-based process to address the needs and perspectives of environmental justice communities. We listen to stories of these communities, stories that should never happen in America. Stories of families in New Jersey forced to walk through raw sewage following heavy rains just to get to work and to school. Of generations of working class folks in Claymont, Delaware, who have awakened each morning to the sights of steel dust on their cars, even as they grapple with the effects of it settling on their lungs. Of communities along the James River in my hometown of Richmond, exposed to arsenic-laced toxic sludge from coal ash ponds linked to liver damage, kidney damage, and a variety of cancers. For far too long, the federal government has turned a blind eye to the impact of toxic pollutions on entire communities, ignoring the devastating effects to their health and well-being, and we cannot accept this reality any longer. I am here because it always looks darkest before the dawn, because change is possible, and it starts with you calling your elected officials to action on this crisis that demands our response. I am here because the stories of those advocates changed me fundamentally, and now I am even more committed to ensuring that my colleagues cannot and must not hide from these harsh truths. If we are going to achieve true justice in our country, we must continue the call to center frontline communities in our policy making. We must meaningfully involve and value environmental justice communities and ensure that environmental justice is our future. We must strengthen our call for enforcement of our environmental laws. We must research and address the cumulative impacts of pollution on overburdened communities. And we must prioritize frontline communities in new federal spending to deploy clean energy and infrastructure. In the new Biden-Harris administration and a united Congress, we have strong partners who recognize the time has come to deliver climate policy that does more than cut carbon pollution. It must tackle our legacy of environmental racism and build a clean energy economy that achieves tangible improvements in people's lives. Together, we will ensure a better, brighter, more sustainable future for all Americans across our country, while delivering justice to communities that have long been denied that justice. The path forward will not be easy, but the crisis we face offers no choice but to be bold. With razor-thin majorities in both chambers, we must continue to fight for strong policy that truly builds back better by centering justice in order to ensure that we leave no community behind. I look forward to being your stalwart partner in this work. Thank you. Thank you so much for being here. God bless you. Go get them.